Welcome to another episode of the Coffee Break Podcast, where our mission is to share business ideas, practices, and strategies while we enjoy our coffee. And today's episode is pretty exciting. We have been excited to do this episode. I have been, at least for the last couple of weeks, as we have been initiating a new book club within our organization. And so today's guest is going to be our very own Levi Gray. We're going to find out a couple of things. Number one, how we got our book club started. And number two, why he's wearing a Dungeons & Dragons bow tie. So grab a cup of coffee and get ready for this conversation.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh, yeah.
Well, welcome again to the Coffee Break Podcast. Levi, thank you for being here again.
Thank you for having me.
It seems like you were just here like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's been nice. It's been good to be regularly
You were here with Kevin. That's what it was. The revisit of our episode 1.
Momentum Revisited, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I'm glad to have you here. So I want to compliment you on your attire today. You look very, very sharp.
Thank you.
I'm thinking like maybe customer success should just initiate bow ties or ties every day.
Yeah, maybe we will.
That would be next level.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to get some Loc-Doc ties and bow ties, though.
We can make that happen if that's going to be a thing. We can make that.
Sure.
That would be
sure. If you buy them, we will wear. I don't know.
Yeah. So if anybody knows where we can get custom logoed ties, then let us do that, because that would be. I'm just thinking, like, while you're talking to somebody on the phone, then we'll have to initiate video calls.
Yeah.
That would be.
Just Zoom calls with
Zoom calls exclusively.
Yes.
As you show up with your bow tie.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. So that's obviously not the whole conversation today, but I did want to say you look very nice.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I didn't know we were dressing up today, so I was kind of casual, but
it's all good,
It's Friday. We're getting ready for kind of a lot of things that are happening in our organization. But here recently, we started a book club. So I really want to be tactical today. So we say at the opening of every podcast that we share business ideas, practices, and strategies. And I think this falls into the practices category.
Sure.
That we're developing a club or a group of people inside of our organization.
Yeah.
So kind of just an outline that I want to try to go through today with you is why we started one, what's the purpose of starting one, how we got it started, and what we hope to expect out of it, and then really give some practical examples to anybody else that would be listening or watching this that says, hey, that'd be something that I think we should do as an organization.
Yeah.
So give us some tips on what you've learned through the process.
Sure.
So let's jump into it. Number one, why did we start a book club?
Yeah, so I think it initially started as with our leadership team. We were meeting, we did our regular team meetings, and then we started to kind of break off into departments. And so I think it was office staff or leadership staff meeting. And we started reading through a book in order to improve our leadership skills. So first and foremost, we just wanted to have the conversations that would allow us to improve our skills as leaders.
What book was that?
Turn the Ship Around was the book.
So Turn the Ship Around was one that we did, I guess, collectively on some Wednesday morning meetings for quite some time. Okay.
Yeah, so that started with the Wednesday morning meeting, and then I think from there, we actually stopped for a while. We started just doing something different with our meetings, and then the discussion came back up of, well, we need to do this again, but we need to make it available to the entire company, and instead of having it within the organization, like during our business day, we needed to have it kind of outside of it to create just a better place for conversation. And I think that's ultimately how it started.
I think it was interesting when we did the first kind of group book read, which was Turn the Ship Around. The things that kind of came up were the group of people that did it, which I'm trying to remember how many at the time, but let's just say it was 8 because it was somewhere around there, give or take. Started to understand and see things through the same same lens, so to speak. Sure. So we kind of had a common language that we were speaking when we say, I intend to do something, or, asking different types of questions, and it was based off of that book. So it kind of created a common language, a common lingo, and a common philosophy or understanding of what we were trying to accomplish as an organization. Yep. And then from there, we also did, if you remember, the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Mm-hmm. And that was a really kind of short, fun read. Yep. But it created a level of conversation afterwards and some takeaways. And then I guess also from there, it created a little bit of what I would say, and maybe I'm off base, so I'll get your opinion. Do you feel like it gave any camaraderie with the people that went through that book or read that book? Yeah,
so as far as the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, that one was for our leadership summit. Mm-hmm. So that was our leadership team, and that was much more similar to our recent book club where we read the book ahead of time, and then we all met in the summit and got to discuss it. But I do think a part of it was it just kind of built this. As we're discussing the ideas in the book, we're all just kind of coming together, sharing our, where we're at with it, where we've, and so a part of that is our history, our opinions, and I think there's just commonality that we shared, even just coming together to discuss the book, even if we don't come away with the same ideas, just the fact that we came together, we share that. There is a sense of community beyond just, hey, we work here together, that I think was really helpful.
So building a little bit of a sense of community with that, I think that's a really good way to put it, and have that commonality. So what, from your perspective, what do you think that we're trying to accomplish by doing those types of things? Because this is, I guess, really where we're starting our 4th book, I guess, collectively as an organization, which we'll talk about what we're reading right now, but in just a little while. But so the 4th book collectively. So what do you like? What would be the purpose of it? Why do we think what are we trying to accomplish?
I think there's a lot of really good reasons, and I think if you're looking for just probably to me the biggest practical impact, if you're looking at the nuts and bolts of it, is the ability to get buy-in from your organization for particular ideas. And I look back to just some of our discussion. A lot of these books you had previously read and were implementing in the organization long before any of us had ever heard of it. Yeah. And then some of us in the leadership team had even read it at times, and we're just saying, oh, hey, these are the things we're pulling from these books. And you're like, yeah, I've been trying to tell you that for years. And then, but with this particular book club, we're seeing all at once, we have 20 people in a room now saying, yeah, we buy into this idea. Mm-hmm. Whereas it took you years to try to implement that and to get people to buy in. So allowing them to come in, read it, and offer their input just gives this immediate ownership. So again, practical, we're looking at an idea that a company can come together and discuss something. It's a safe place for them to come in and offer their thoughts and opinions and how do they think we should do this, do that. It's not a formal meeting where you say, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do business. And it allows you to get that much more traction as a company because you're all on the same page and you all have had an equal share of input into these ideas, and allows you to connect better, to relate to each other better, and just be a better team.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thinking through it, what we started out with was we had a specific group of people as part of a team, and so it was actually part of our regular meeting cadence. Yep. And it was a required reading element of a regular meeting cadence. So to break that down, because maybe that sounds too vague, but there was a group of, we at a point in time for our weekly team meetings, we would all gather together, all hands on, for the first 30 minutes, and then we would break into smaller groups for the remaining hour. Yeah. And for that time, it was kind of office admin staff, and then we broke into the electronics team and the locksmith mechanical team. So we had kind of 3 groups happening simultaneously. Yep. And so the administrative group, we said, all right, this is going to be required reading for that. Yeah. And we did it I think a couple of lessons I learned from it, and I'm interested to hear your perspective on it as well, is we broke that down into a weekly conversation over a couple of chapters of the book.
Yeah.
So we took a book and we said, all right, you're going to be required to read these 2 or 3 chapters this week. What were the lessons that you learned from that? How did that, like, I guess what was the execution like on it?
I think that there's obviously pros to that methodology. I think that we were able to go through the information piece by piece. I do think that one thing that I guess there was a con that you can see is that we didn't know what was coming ahead. So the fact that it was required reading, you have to read this amount. So you're reading this amount this week. You haven't read the whole book, so you're just reading this chapter. And, we're presenting whatever it is. We're discussing this small thing, and there's only so much time to discuss it in.
Yeah.
It's almost like asking a question, but only asking half the question. And so it's like nobody has the full picture.
Yeah.
And so you're only able to really get into, you can't really get into the meat and potatoes sometimes of the discussion because of that. But also the fact that it was a required meeting was also another thing. It was like, this is just a part of our work day. And for some reason or other, our brains are just wired that if I'm required to do it for work, I'm just going to be kind of a curmudgeon about it versus if I actually am allowed to volunteer, to do it. Now I'm a part of it because I want to be a part of it. I automatically, and ironically, it's kind of been a theme through the books that we've been going through anyway. But if I'm taking ownership of it, that I want to do this, suddenly I feel much more likely to commit to those ideas and commit to actually being there and participating.
Just a reminder, you're listening to the Coffee Break Podcast. Also, we wanted to let you know that our team puts together a weekly blog post. You can find it at locdoc.net/blog. It's guaranteed to raise your IQ by 12 points or your money back. So it's pretty much a win-win. All right, back to the conversation.
I would totally agree. Yeah. I felt like we got some progress out of the required reading, out of the required kind of component of it.
Yeah.
But there's a whole different level when you voluntarily do it or you want to do it. Is it something that you want to be a part of versus something that you have to be a part of? Because you might have part of the group that's like, man, this is awesome, and then part of the group that says, man, this isn't really my thing. Yeah. And so that kind of changes a little bit of your dynamic. I would say also on that is, of the 2 kind of required reading groups that we had before, the 2 different variations of it was, one, the first one we did kind of chapter by chapter, and we met weekly for it. And then the second one that we did was read the entire book, completed before we come to the conversation. Yep. What was the difference that you saw in that? Because doing research on book clubs, there's a couple of different ways to go about it, and I've done some other, just other community groups or whatever that you're progressively reading a book together. Yeah. And it seems like there is definitely a decisive difference between reading the entire book versus reading chapter by chapter and then discussing.
Yeah, I think one of the main things is that there was freedom to finish the book how you need to. Everybody read the book a different way. Some people audiobook, some people read it in person. So some people did it throughout their day. Some people did it however, like some people would just wait until the weekend and just read massive chunks. And so each person kind of had freedom to read it how they wanted to, but also you got the whole picture. So we came to the meeting with everything from start to finish, and so we're really coming to it with the full idea of what we wanted to take out of it. And so each of us had a different piece of the puzzle that we kind of brought into it. But I think the main thing is that we had gone through the whole book. So as we're discussing it, we're dealing with the ideas as a whole and not cutting it down into pieces. Which is, I think, really important is looking at the book as a whole and not just tearing it apart and then looking at each piece. I feel like there's something to that that allows us to understand it more fully and be able to discuss it better. So So there's that.
So from that, we had those two kind of groups
Yep.
required, and we did those two books together. So now, what do we hope to accomplish out of this? We said kind of the ability to get some buy-in, some sense of community.
Yeah.
So next question is, from an architectural standpoint, how did we get started? So we had the groups before that were required. This is what we're going to do. Now we're starting something kind of brand new from scratch. What did we do? How did we go about it?
So yeah, we basically we set up our meeting. We said, here's the time we're going to do it. We're going to do it on the second Thursday of every month. And then we set up a Google form. We had everybody come in and say, here's how I would like the book, either Audible or Kindle or physical book or whatever. And we set up the expectations. We said, show up at this time. We're going to provide food. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We built some documents together of expectations of here's what you're expected to do in the meetings. We want you here not just to eat, but we want you here to participate. But it is out of you are volunteering to do it. You're not required to do it. But we did say, it's required for leadership. If you want to be a part of the leadership team, we want you to participate in these discussions since it is related to improving our organization. So completely volunteer, setting up the expectations. And so then we just kind of scheduled it at that point and allow everybody to kind of be a part of it.
So architecturally said, this is what the expectations are. This is kind of how it's going to look. Communicate that out, ask for volunteers. And then put a kind of date on the calendar. We also, I think, listed out the types of books that we were going to be reading so that people could understand that, because I think that was one of the questions that people were like, what is this about? How is this going to work? Obviously, offering alternates for the type of book. So if you want to do paperback, or if you want to do a Kindle, or if you want to do an audio book, so that you can adapt to whatever your reading style is. And then I think a couple of the other things is having a time gap in place for it. So we chose to do ours in the evening, so between 5 and 7, and then we provide food during that time. So just trying to create, again, that sense of community, that sense of, if I'm going to show up and I'm going to be here, then everything's going to be taken care of me to do that. And we, as an organization, provide all the reading materials. So we're going to buy the book, we're going to pay for the Audible credit, or whatever the case may be to do that. So from that, once you set up the architecture, you said, this is how it's going to work. You started kind of asking for volunteers. What was your expectation? What did you think was going to happen?
I thought there would be some hesitation. I definitely thought there would be less people than there were, just because of what we've experienced in the past, even though it was generally a required thing. Even then, participation was, and so I was kind of iffy about who's going to participate and who's going to be there just to eat, which, can't blame them. I love a good meal, especially if it's free. But so that was kind of my expectation at the first, is that surely there wouldn't be, a ton of people there, at least at first, and that some of them probably would be maybe hesitant to participate.
And what was the outcome? What actually ended up happening?
Yeah, we had a huge show up. I think, was it 15 the first time, or 16 people? And honestly, the participation was basically 100%. Even people who were admittedly not necessarily the first people to participate. They generally don't want to talk, but those people even chimed in and were willing to participate. So there's no one there who was there just to get a free meal. They were all there, or if they were, at least they felt guilty enough for being there that they wanted to participate. So it was kind of mind blowing, actually, how many people showed up. How it was very encouraging to see that many people in the organization who wanted to be a part of it. And improve themselves and improve the organization.
So we had a big room. We just kind of spread all the chairs out. Had a big circle discussion, and then we also have the virtual option as well. So anybody that couldn't actually physically be there, they could join in remotely. So I think we had 5 or 4 remote folks, and then everybody else was kind of in person and trying to just kind of keep an engaging conversation. So just something as simple as a webcam on a television or webcam on a computer to keep that engagement. And then from that, kind of week 1 or first meeting before we had read any books, it was just an introductory meeting. So kind of talk through the thought process behind the introductory meeting, and so because first meeting was not come already have read this book. It was come and find out what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think it was really important to set the expectations of here's what this meeting is going to look like. Partially of just hey, here's your last chance to back out. If you're not ready for this, but mainly just to kind of set ground rules of here's what we expect from you as being a part of it. Here's what we'll provide. If you're coming, you will get your book. You will have food to eat. You will have a space to speak if you want to speak. But what we expect is that you read the whole book, that you participate, we also specifically ask that people would listen to others and to participate and speak because other people are need their opinion as well. So I think setting those expectations was important so that people knew so much can happen with unspoken expectations, is that there's so many assumptions of what it would look like. So many people who've been a part of certain meetings that might just assume it would go that way, where they don't need to participate, and so just saying it, just being out there and saying it, letting everybody know here's what you need to do, I think just sets the bar for what it should look like, and then also just kind of then we had discussion also on what do you think, not only our expectations, but what do you hope to accomplish in this? What do you think it means to follow these expectations, like listening and speaking? Why do you think they're important? And then, of course, what do you think this book means? What do you think it's going to be like? And I think we had some really good discussion on all of that, which allowed us to, again, all come together on the same page of why we're even here in this room discussing this, and why is that even important? And all of us had a really good kind of input on the importance of improving our organization by being in those kind of situations, and that it was important enough to show up outside of work when we weren't required to. And I thought that was a really good conversation.
So setting expectations up front at the introductory meeting, this is what it's going to be like, this is what we're going to do, this is how it's going to operate. And then I think one of the also interesting components of it where we talked about we don't want the conversation to just be in this room. We want it to be continual throughout the organization, throughout the day, wherever you're at the book, just having a discussion. And that was an interesting component that I want to kind of break into from like how you saw that play out. So our first meeting was the second Thursday in October, which I have no idea what that date was, but it was the second Thursday in October. And we decided that we were going to meet on the second Thursday of every month. So we had our first discussion of the book on the second Thursday of November. So the time between October and November, what did you see happen inside of our organization for the folks that were participating?
Yeah, I saw there was a lot of, so we have our chat groups through Google Chat, and we set one up for the book club. I saw a lot of people just kind of chiming in like, hey, here's where I'm at in the book. Here's what I'm going through. Like, oh man, this blew my mind. This part was crazy. And then some of them were just even progress updates, not even necessarily thoughts on the book, but just, oh man, here I'm at chapter 8. Where are you guys at? And so everybody was kind of engaging in kind of like a friendly competition of here's where I'm at in the book, here's how far I've gotten. So everybody else is like, ooh, I'm behind. I need to catch up. And so that's one big thing I saw. But also another thing is even in the office, I'm walking around and I'm seeing people who were in the book club say, oh man, did you hear what chapter 8 was about? Like that was crazy. Like, and just going back and forth and just really engaging on those ideas just throughout their normal workday, which I thought was really cool. It just showed that that there was buy-in. It wasn't just, hey, I'm going to do this, like I'm going to listen to this whole book like the weekend before, and then that way, but it's everyone's really participating, and they really believe in this idea, and they're all kind of participating, and everyone's excited about it, and so it's just bleeding out into their daily routines at work. So
it was interesting last night. One of the questions that you asked was, it was not even on this list, but it was a kind of a precursor. Was one, did you finish the book? You kind of asked that around the room, and so I was kind of taking notes on here based off of what folks said, and it was intriguing because a lot of folks were kind of going through and they either switched from the paper version to the audio version or vice versa. Yeah. So switch from audio to paper. And then there were several people that said we had started, we use Google G Suite in our organization for Gmail and chat and all that stuff. And so in the Google Chat app, we started a book club thread. Yeah. And I think I noted here several folks had said that the conversation in the book club chat helped them stay accountable and stay on track and to kind of know where other people were at. And so it was kind of just an ongoing conversation. Yeah. And then other folks said that having a deadline helped them be accountable. Yeah. So it wasn't just like, hey, you should read this book. Yeah, sure, I'll do it at some point in time, and maybe make it through a portion of it. But they actually finished it. And some folks admittedly said, I just finished it today, or I just finished it last night, or whatever. But a majority of people, I think, from what I was hearing, said that they finished it a week or so ago. Yeah. And so they had plenty of time to get through it and digest it and understand it and have a conversation about it. But the folks that didn't pace themselves throughout the month still at least had a deadline, and they still came prepared. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think it was a partially kind of the whole ownership idea that here's the expectation that you read the book, and so everyone's committing to that for the next meeting. And because we commit, and because we were regularly kind of updating each other, we were discussing it throughout. There's kind of an accountability. There's kind of this sense of, if I show up to that meeting and I didn't read the book, not only am I, I'm at the bottom of the food chain in the meeting because I didn't read the whole book. But beyond that, like I might not understand what they're talking about when they're discussing the book, or I might not have the right kind of input to give. Yeah. And so I think it really caused, on the one hand, of a kind of competitive standpoint of I want to be one of the ones that finished it. Yeah. But also there's the other sense of which I don't want to miss out on anything that might be discussed in the book. So I think kind of both of those played into. I got to finish this, whatever it takes.
Can you copy this key? That's a question we get asked about 3,422 times a year. And how can you actually be sure that the person who asked that question is supposed to get a copy of that key? Well, we think you should always know who can copy your keys to your business and your home, because it could be your neighbor, an old employee, a contractor, or even worse, your mother-in-law. At Loc-Doc Security, we believe in protected key systems, so you always know who has a copy of your key. To find out more, visit locdoc.net or stop by our Charlotte location. Loc-Doc Security, helping you protect your people and your property. So having a compelling reason to finish it, having those expectations up front, and then, again, walking into it from an execution standpoint, from how did we do this? I mean, I actually have the notes here, or the sheet that you had printed off yesterday, the agenda, and then discussion questions. Yep. And I think that this is a really important component of it. Yeah. And so I want to applaud you on doing your homework on this and actually having it together, because I think these were sitting on the chairs when everybody came in the room. Yeah. So the only thing I thought about yesterday was we should probably email this out ahead of time so that the people that are virtually have it as well. But regardless, there were discussion questions there, and so everybody got to look at them, and they knew where the conversation was going. Yeah. And just having a preparedness for that. Now, I've been in book club discussions before, or in group discussions before, where those questions were not known ahead of time. Mm-hmm. They were kind of sprung on you. And so for a lot of people, personality-wise, they don't respond to unknown questions very quickly. Yeah. They want to know a little bit more what they're supposed to be preparing for. Yeah. So I think having that even 30 minutes ahead of time, so you can look through and go, okay, hold on a second, I'm clear on that versus just the surprise question and then everybody's like, trying to process that quickly is a huge element. So having some clear and defined expectations up front, having a deadline, having some form of group accountability, if it's a chat, if it's a text thread, if it's something ongoing throughout that month or throughout whatever time period that you suggest is imperative, or else you're going to lose people. And then having some predetermined questions to discuss so that you can get that conversation going. Now, from that last night, I don't think we made it through all these questions, but we also had some other conversations come up outside of these questions. But so it was at least just a starting point.
Yeah, and I think the main thing is having questions. You want to have a good balance of structure and fluidity with it, because a part of it, like for me, the discussion questions are there when it's hard to figure out where to start. But I think it's also important when people bring up an important issue to flow with how the conversation is going, because those are just guides to help us flow, to allow the conversation to flow. And so I think they're very important to allow the discussion not to become too chaotic, but also we don't want to rigidly follow the questions. We want to, there were very natural conversations that kind of flew out of those. That I thought were really good. Even some of the ones that were way off. There obviously this book particular dealt with some political stuff that people weren't 100%. But the fact that those came up and we didn't shy away from it, I think was huge to allow people to feel like they were in a safe place to discuss their ideas. It was an open marketplace, so to speak, of ideas where we could exchange them without fear of, hey,
you're wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong. But everyone's like, hey, here's what we think. Here's what I thought. And people didn't say, hey, I disagree, or hey, this is not the place for that. But they actually said, oh, that's interesting. Like that's an interesting perspective. And so I think there was just even more camaraderie from that, allowing the conversation to just kind of flow naturally.
So overall, we had a little more than 50% of our organization show up and volunteer and participate in this. We had, I think, through the process, one person join like midways through that we didn't even know joined. Well, I didn't, but we didn't even know joined, and then he came to the conversation. And it looks like we've added another one or two for this next book. So we're sitting here looking at our first book that we did. And what's our what was like? Let me turn that into a question. What was the first book that we went through as an organization, and then what is the second one that we're doing?
So the first one was "Leaders Eat Last" by Simon Sinek. It's about just kind of building a culture of leaders that put their company and their organization first, and just all the kind of ins and outs of that dynamic. And then the second one is going to be 4 Disciplines of Execution, which I know we've had a previous conversation on a podcast about. Link right here,
Link below in the description below.
So that's the one we're going to be reviewing in the next book club.
Okay. So 4 Disciplines of Execution is a book that we have gone through in a couple of different pockets of our organization, but I think there's major value in a larger majority of folks going through it. So we're gonna do that. And I had another idea this morning for our third book, so we'll chat about that later as well. Perfect. There's a lot of big things happening right now within that whole realm, and I think my big takeaway from what we've started to this point is just getting a conversation going, getting people on the same page, and then having some excitement around growth. So I know there's a sign over my shoulder that says "always improving," and it's kind of a mantra that we've adapted inside of our organization. And this really falls into that. Is if you want to grow, if you want to improve, then come. Let's have a time to do that. And it's very casual, but it is at least formalized that we can do it as an organization. So, if you're a business owner out there, you're a leader at some form, and you say, hey, you know what? I'd like to do this for my organization. I can tell you that at the end of the day, it is a very, very small investment of time and money to be able to build, like you said, that sense of community for exactly what you're trying to develop in your organization. It can be a major culture boost. And based off of the books you selected, I would tell you that if you're going to do it though, then you should read the book ahead of time. So don't just choose a book that somebody says and then surprise read it all together, because that could
this does not work well.
This is not what we were going for. But have that aspect where there's some preparation of exactly what you're going to be going over, and then go ahead and think through that. And I think one of the things we discussed at the early onset was we don't want this to be a one and done. So let's go ahead and think through it. How can this be sustainable? How do we get this on the calendar so it's repeatable? And then for us, we just did Chipotle as a takeout. Very reasonable, cost effective. Get everybody some food, and we just sit around and have a chat about the topics. But outside of that, and I want to say this: just the meetings alone are great. But the conversation for the month in between was priceless. Just having the ability to, walking back and forth, getting coffee at the coffee bar. There's conversation about like you were talking about earlier. What did you think about that section of that chapter or whatever? It's just a whole different conversation. And multiple people have mentioned this. I know Sam mentioned it to me multiple times. The ability to have a conversation with somebody that is outside of just, here's this task to do, here's what you need from me, here's what I need from you, very transactional. It changed into more of just a cultural conversation, and I think that was a big win.
Yeah, and I think to me it kind of points out the importance of the conversation is so much more important than how do I say that? Like, so the ideas that you want to implement. So you can set up a meeting and say, hey guys, we're going to implement these ideas. This is what we as a company believe. So here you go. I printed them out for you, memorize them. You're going to be held accountable to those things. Versus starting the conversation and just letting them, just kind of discuss them amongst themselves. The amount of buy-in that you get from that, when it's organically done, I think is the best way to say it. Like, I think that's what we saw in this, is that there was organic growth within the organization that allowed them to buy into those ideas without even being told. And just merely because they were able to have the conversations of, hey, this is what I thought about this chapter, and not everybody agreed with every single aspect. We had people who were like, yeah, I didn't even read the millennial chapter or the boomer chapter or whatever, and then others were like, well, it was spot on with the millennials and all that. But the interesting thing was that the conversation was had, and now we're all to an extent on the same page. Even if we don't 100% agree, the conversation has started, and now there's this community built around these ideas. And so we have something to move forward with versus just one man saying, hey, here's everything that I believe, and you're going to follow that. And it goes back to the leadership ideal of leaders eat last, that the leader is not basically, cracking the whip and saying, hey, here's what it is. But the leader is cultivating the idea by starting the conversation. And once the conversation happens, because there was trust kind of put forward into the company of saying, hey, I trust you with these ideas to have the conversation on your own without me telling you what to think or what not to think. That allowed them to kind of unite around those ideas even more so. So now it's a part of the DNA of that. And I really liked what you said towards the end about, there's 20 of us in this room. There's like 40-something employees. So now your job is to go out and to share those things with those other employees who weren't here. And that just kind of stood out to me that, like, how much easier it is to share those ideas now that we've had those conversations. How much easier it is for us to impact our organization based on this event without it just being like a formal official meeting. It's like now we're passing it on these ideas just in an organic way, and it's so much more effective.
It's funny you say that, and I believe it's very, very true. There's 20 of us in the room, 19 of us in the room, or whatever. All it takes is each person sharing it with one other person in the organization, and it's there. But as a full investment of time, I think the book, if you listen to it as an audiobook, and obviously it depends on your reading speed, but it was around a 9-hour read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We had a meeting, a 2-hour meeting around it. So you've got 10 hours invested.
Yeah.
Now think about that in what you just said. Because we have plenty of team meetings. We have a Monday morning meeting. We have a Wednesday morning meeting. We have a lot of those type of all-team meetings.
Yes.
In order to get that type of information to everybody in the organization in a 45-minute time block, you're now spreading that out over 11, 12, 13 meetings.
Yeah.
Right? So the amount of impact that you can have in 1 month because you have those people that are saying, hey, yeah, we want to learn, we want to grow, we want to, they can pick up on those ideas and really receive them in a completely different way than just somebody in a group meeting that's just saying, this is what you need to do. So I think it's very valuable. Yeah.
And I think it's the difference between pouring water into a cup and drawing water out of a well.
I'm getting scared with your water analogies, Levi. If this has to do with a water balloon, I'm gonna.
Well, let me defend my analogy first. So when you pour water into a cup, that's all you got. You know, you can't pour more water into the cup. But when you draw water out of the well, you're pulling it out from that source. You're not like, that's an endless source of water for you. Like that's, so it's the difference between giving someone an idea, saying, hey, here's your idea, which isn't their idea anyway. You're just putting it in their head, versus showing them how to pull that idea out of themselves. And so you get, again, we call it buy-in. But it's really just organic learning. It's allowing someone to ask the question before you give them the answer to the question.
I read an article this morning on Inc.com, and it said it was like a list of 32 buzzwords that people hate, and buy-in was one of them. But it was a great analogy. I applaud you. That was a good one.
I'm working on it.
It's redemption from the water balloon.
Yeah.
Those of you that are watching or listening to this podcast, we thank you for doing so. If this is your first time, we ask you to subscribe. We have over 100 other episodes available for you, and you can find them all listed on the links below. But if you go to locdoc.net/podcast, they're there for you. You can subscribe on whatever audio platform that you're on, or you can see the video version. Where can you find those, Levi?
Our YouTube channel?
YouTube and Facebook. So you can go there and search for Loc-Doc and podcast, and they'll come up, and you can see all the episodes there. And if you're listening to this, then I would tell you, make sure you go and check out the video version, because you'll see Levi's bow tie, and you don't want to miss out on the bow tie. So check that out. We've got some more exciting episodes coming for you down the line, and really an exciting episode to share with you in a couple of weeks with a very, very special guest. So make sure you subscribe so you always get the latest version. It comes out every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from your thoughts on this. If you have questions about how to get a book club started in your organization, please reach out to us. We'll share all the information that we have, share any of the documents that we have, the list of books that we're going to be going through, and more on the structure of how we got it set up. But we think it's a really great value add for your organization. So if you have any questions, please reach out for us. But outside of that, make sure you subscribe. Click the link below, notification bell.
Yep. Click the stuff, do the things.
Leave a comment.
Yep.
And we'll see you next time on the Coffee Break Podcast.